The cranes are still, the air is heavy, and a new kind of silence hangs over North American ports, not the silence of prosperity, but of paperwork, reroutes, and deals rewritten at midnight. In Washington, a pen stroke raises walls around the world. In Ottawa, a flurry of countermeasures tries to keep factories humming. The trade map is being redrawn in real time. It doesn't sound like an explosion. It sounds like contracts delayed, cargo diverted, and meetings held behind closed doors. This is how power shifts now, through tariffs, court rulings, and binational policies that decide whose hands build the future. President Trump has locked in a sweeping trade agenda centered on high, reciprocal tariffs and leverage by decree. An executive order sets a baseline 15% tariff on nearly all Japanese imports, with special treatment for automobiles and parts, aerospace, generic pharmaceuticals, and certain natural resources. Many other levies, across Europe, Canada, India, Brazil, and beyond, sit in a tense legal limbo after a federal appeals court ruled that most of the tariffs exceeded presidential authority, even as it allowed them to remain in place during appeal. The White House has asked the U.S. Supreme Court for an expedited review, warning that, without a quick win, America might need to unwind recent deals with the European Union, Japan, and South Korea. Meanwhile, new semiconductor import tariffs are coming shortly, with exceptions telegraphed for firms that pledge substantial U.S. investment. Apple, by the president's own hint, is in pretty good shape. On India, where duties were doubled to 50% after New Delhi's purchases of Russian oil, there's no retreat. No, he said, when asked if tariffs might be rolled back. In short, Washington is wielding tariffs as the central instrument of industrial policy, both a weapon and a negotiating chip, while daring courts and partners to keep up. Canada is not waiting to see how the court drama ends. Prime Minister Mark Carney has unveiled a national counter-strategy built to absorb shock, retrain workers, and tilt public money toward domestic suppliers. Headlines call it billions in funding and a Buy Canada turn. The core idea is resilience. Buy Canada procurement. Federal purchasing will favor Canadian suppliers, with a roadmap to bring provinces and municipalities along. An industrial magnet designed to keep production onshore when U.S. doors narrow. $5 billion Strategic Response Fund. Capital to help tariff-hit industries adapt, retool, and retrain their workforce. Reskilling package. Extended and more flexible EI benefits, a new digital jobs program, and skills upgrades for 50,000 workers so plants can pivot instead of shuttering. BDC Lending Flex plus $1 billion extra support. Easier credit for small and mid-sized firms to bridge tariff turbulence. Agriculture relief. A $370 million biofuel production incentive, regulatory tweaks to help clean fuel producers, and canola relief as Canadian exporters endure Beijing's 75.8% tariff on canola. A second front in the wider trade war. EV mandate pause. Waiving the 2026 model year requirement and launching a 60-day review, a concession to automakers under tariff strain, meant to keep jobs rooted in Ontario and beyond while industry recalibrates. Diplomatically, Ottawa is working the phones. After a constructive call with President Trump, Canada dispatched senior officials to Washington to pursue sector-by-sector deals in autos, steel, and aluminum, where exposure is acute. Some Canadian goods face 35% U.S. tariffs, while the USMCA still shields many others, keeping Canada's effective average tariff claim comparatively low. But uncertainty remains the killer, hence the mix of negotiation, cushioning, and domestic preference. The promise to cut red tape has, ironically, wrapped many firms in more of it. Importers now game out ship dates to outrun tariff clocks, routing goods through bonded warehouses abroad to avoid surprise costs. July's trade deficit widened to $78.3 billion as companies front-loaded imports before new levies, adding volatility that already nudged down GDP forecasts. If the Supreme Court ultimately strikes the tariffs, hundreds of billions of dollars in refunds could flow, but to importers, not consumers. Households that swallowed higher prices won't get a check back. And even where the White House offers relief, hinting Apple is safe, others await chip tariffs that could tighten supply, lift costs, and force more production reshoring, but at the price of near-term inflation and complexity. Canada's exposure is structural. Decades of integrated supply chains in autos, steel, and aluminum tie its prosperity to U.S. market access. The Buy Canada pivot, plus billions for retraining and retooling, aims to domesticate demand and keep assembly lines alive if U.S. orders falter. The EV pause is controversial, trading climate momentum for industrial survival, but it buys time for suppliers facing tariffs and rule changes. Agriculture shows how multi-front this is. Ottawa's biofuel incentives and canola relief are a reminder that Canada must navigate U.S. pressure and Chinese penalties simultaneously. The message to Canadian firms is unambiguous: diversify markets, harden supply chains, and expect policy to favor those who build at home. Ripples have become waves. Japan secured a cut to U.S. auto tariffs from 27.5% to 15%, rallying Tokyo stocks, but squeezing smaller automakers that may pass costs to American buyers or retrench their model lineup. A leaked memorandum suggests Japanese funding choices, up to $550 billion, will track U.S.-picked investments, a new kind of geopolitical pay-to-play. China, after investigating anti-circumvention, imposed 33% to 78% duties on specific U.S. optical fiber imports, precision retaliation that targets high-tech arteries. India, spooked by tariff whiplash, is hunting for new pharma markets in Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, and even looking to sell more into China, all to reduce dependence on a volatile U.S. channel. And far from the seas, Chongqing is scaling up a land bridge, a Suez Canal on rails, connecting Southeast Asia to Europe via high-speed freight. Deals are being signed, in Mandarin, not English. Tariffs are no longer a spreadsheet line. They're a steering wheel. The United States is attempting to pilot a controlled decoupling, punishing rivals, prodding allies, and luring capital home, while its legal authority to do so is under review by the highest court. If Washington wins, tariffs become the new normal of American statecraft. If it loses, the policy still leaves a mark. A world that has spent 2 years building contingency plans to live without guaranteed U.S. access. Allies are adapting with eyes open. Japan accepts lower auto tariffs, but with strings that channel investments back into U.S. preferred projects through 2029. Canada turns inward with Buy Canada, choosing resilience over reliance. In Europe, energy strategists say they'd welcome U.S. backing to end Russian oil purchases by 2028, but they're setting the timeline themselves. India hedges between Washington and Beijing, pursuing its own tax reforms and export pivots. And at the SCO summit, the optics were unmistakable: Russia, India, and China, shoulder to shoulder. While the White House laments that both Moscow and New Delhi seem lost to deepest, darkest China. Picture the landscape. Ports gone quiet as shipments await legal clarity. Bonded warehouses in Korea and Singapore stacked with U.S.-bound goods on pause. Assembly lines in Ontario and Michigan rescheduling shifts, while procurement rules flip. Freight trains snaking west from inland China toward Europe, containers sealed with customs stamps in languages that once mattered less to global trade. In that quiet, something profound is happening. The world is building workarounds, not out of defiance, but out of survival. Superpowers don't always fall with a crash. Sometimes they're priced out, papered over, procedurally delayed. Sometimes they sign the order that moves business elsewhere. In this chapter, America wasn't pushed out. It was quietly replaced. Is this how superpowers fade? Through silence, not shock? Drop your thoughts below, hit subscribe, and share this video. The next chapter of this trade war will be written in boardrooms, courts, and cargo holds. And this story isn't over yet.